just add that it's not only the issue of penetration when 40% or maybe 60 or 70% in more metropolitan communities. It's also what people are doing with the technology, right? So that it's, I think going forward, if we're thinking about a just society, that it's really critical that people are not just consuming newspaper articles, that they're also, writing newspaper articles, creating businesses, creating sort of stimulating, various sorts of businesses and economic in their communities. And so this is a little bit of the problem with the digital divide frame, even as in the way that an organization like the Pew Internet and American Life Project, which is brilliant. I mean, they gather so much terrific data. It's the only really big data sets that we have. But that frame, shows, something like increase, now we're up to sort of African Americans, I think, 80% or closer to 90% of people sort of, can use a computer sometimes, be it at the library or whatever, which is certainly a lot higher than it was in, say, 96 or something. But it's the case that people are, they don't know how to, one of the issues we didn't put on the policy board is this issue of open source software. Is it like, are people learning how to use open source software? Do they know that they can get operating systems for free? These sorts of things. Those are kind of I think the bigger issues about sort of justice going forward. And I think that's where that we have to be really, I think sort of very clear about the various kind of valences or modalities of access, and that just having a computer and an internet line is just, I think, the bare bones.
There's capacity.
And
yes, yeah, for sure.
One project that I'm going to be working on in Minnesota and Iowa will be working with immigrant communities, and I'll just be part of a digital storytelling, but other people are working to teach folks how to blog and to use Facebook and to really counter the kind of hate speech that's going on the internet around immigration issues. And, it's overwhelmingly negative and directed against immigrants. And so there's a real need. We all believe in freedom of expression, freedom of the press, but, it needs to be for everybody. And so communities do need that training and that, expertise in how to use these technologies, how to write for it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's another major issue in this whole technology discussion is who owns it and who controls it. And a good example would be the concentration of radio stations. For example, Clear Channel, when they start buying up all the black radio stations, and you start seeing, hearing the same thing in Cleveland as you do in Atlanta, as you do in whatever, and understanding the history of black radio was oftentimes protest radio and getting social conscious. The same thing is true in terms of black magazines like Essence magazine is the same people who own People magazine, Time Warner, as Essence, and BET, for example, and comparing BET in terms of the news shows, in terms of the social consciousness shows, not just the music videos, but the piece where people had hard hitting, and after Viacom, bought it out and seeing the difference, and so also the history of black newspapers and how black newspapers from the very beginning, even during slavery, some of the protest newspapers, and then after slavery and on up through whatever, looking at the newspapers themselves, the role of black newspapers in terms of fighting for justice. And I think the extent to which those newspapers, the print newspapers, have now also converted to electronic, and the extent to which they can still hold an audience in terms of its print part, the paper that maybe Houston Informer, Houston whatever paper where it's actually free in the barbershop or whatever, but also in terms of on the internet-based format can also get to the audience that you're talking about, who the 95% internet savvy black people who can manipulate and whatever, but also to serve that same role that they served before, when the white newspapers, the racist white newspapers that we still have today, you know, the major papers like in Atlanta, we got one newspaper, it's very conservative, it's basically a rag. And how do we make sure that we have black newspapers that can challenge what's going on and tell the truth, but at the same time deal with some of these issues as they've historically dealt with, whether it's the Amsterdam News in Harlem or whether it's the Chicago Defender or whatever. That's where I think making sure that technology is also kept, you know, the skills and the resources also kept up so that we can have that web-based piece.
I have yeah, you can make a comment, but I have a cue, and it was here, then Carl, then Marcia, and we can take it down.
I completely agree. I think that you raised some critical issues. I would only add that at the same time, we have a growing, you know, as more rural people, as more sort of members of marginalized communities get online, there are these sort of growing and quite robust blog networks. So part of the Gina 6 story is all of these bloggers that got together, linked to each other. There was a whole kind of network through blog rolls of people sort of just bringing this to visibility, right? And so, you know, I think that there are things going on that I think are beneficial as well, that there are increasingly, I mean, I think that we couldn't even imagine in '95 the kind of community of black bloggers or black issues bloggers, even progressive bloggers of color, moreover, that exists now. So, you know, I think there are kind of, you know, pluses and benefits worth keeping in mind for sure. Or pluses and minuses, rather.
It was here, then over here, then I got a few hands over here, 3 hands, and I'll come over here.
Great stuff, important stuff, so thank you both. On this issue of control, one of the things I think with respect to policy that we could be talking about is how to influence or put pressure on the FCC. I think for the last 8 years, we've certainly seen a turnaround, and I guess it's really even been longer than that, but this push towards the centralization and the concentration of power and control and the regulations that have allowed for that, so that a given company is controlling market shares of radio, TV, and so on, in a newspaper in a given community, so that not only are they controlling access, but they're controlling the message, they're controlling the discourse, and then you know, you talk about the rag in Atlanta. You know, I can certainly talk about the rag in our community, and I think probably many of us can, right? And that a lot of that stems from the fact that there is this concentrated control and the lowered expectations for quality. And at the same time, I think even with the bloggers, you know, you've talked about the powerful ways in which blogging has been used, but somehow I think that anything we can do to push more honest and kinds of blogging with integrity, because I've also seen a lot of hate, and a lot of, you know, there's a freedom, it seems, bloggers feel that they have to just say whatever they feel like saying, and there's no accountability for whether there's any sort of truth to what they're saying and whether it's fact-based or not. And so I think there needs to be really some standards around integrity and the use of that form. But switching gears a little bit, Alondra, I wanted to ask you a question, because besides, you know, the information and communication kinds of technologies, this issue that you just touched on but didn't really say too much about, the genetic technologies. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to speak to with respect to, for example, genetic screening and how that plays into race,
Sure.
and the implications that has for various kinds of policies. It seems that it's really a vehicle to set us back, you know, several hundred years in terms of the even a more entrenched sort of racism now that's based on these sort of genetic kinds of technologies.
I mean, I think